Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy. The Russell Cosmogony by Walter and Lau Russell. A Home Study Course. Unit V. Lessons 17, 18, 19, 20. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. No part of this manuscript can be painted in any form without permissio and from the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a magazine or newspaper. Issued by the Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, S.C. D. Lesson number 17. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. We add one more idea, the fulcrum and the lever, before continuing our long journey from matter of Earth to its source behind the scenes in the invisible universe. I cannot restrain myself from telling you the great satisfaction it is giving us to hear how gloriously you are even now applying it to your lives. Our greatest desire is to worthily fulfill our purpose. Your letters convince us that we are, for when the little part of the journey you have already traveled has revealed so much to you already, what a wonderful thing it will be when you actually know that complexity is but the multiplied illusion you have been limited to during past ages, and that behind the scenes is the real simplicity of one, centering and extended two, which will dissolve all complexity from your thinking forever. I will continue to dwell upon energy and its source, also its expression in the divided universe, for quite a little time, until you begin to be able to automatically forget material effect the farther you go in our little journey back to the undivided and unchanging source. 277. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 278. Mc.m.mark equals qk m a m. There is no more important thing for you to know than the source of energy you use for operating your material body and for motivating the thought bodies you create in your imaginings before giving them material bodies equals, and for manifesting all mechanical expressions ranging from lifting a feather to moving a locomotive or a mountain. Degrees is only one source of energy and one mechanical principle, key means of which it can be used. Degrees, that is what I must make clear to you, and I must dwell upon it until it is made so clear /words and diagrams that you can apply it comprehensively to your creative thinking with greater power. Degrees, likewise, the chemist, electrical engineer, inventor or physicist can apply it to the simplification of his mechanical processes. You will make a good beginning in building up your comprehension by giving deep thought to the following postulates and axioms which go to the root of the subject. Degrees, these postulates really define energy, but no definition of energy can explain it without exemplification, because orthodox thinking has made it impossible. Postulates concerning energy: God is all. Degrees, in him is all. 2112 xa. All know and all being. God created his universe with energy which is in him, not in his creation. Degrees, the energy of God's mind is desire to give expression to idea of his knowing. 122, and y1.12e. Imaged forms to his being. Mind knows and thinks what it knows. Degrees, energy lies in mind knowing but is expressed, or manifested. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 279. By mind thinking, energy is still. God's magnetic light is at rest. Degrees, God's mind is the fulcrum upon which the lever of his electric thinking pulsates to give heartbeats to his universal. 1221 x. created him in the image of his knowing. Energy lies in cause but is expressed in effect degrees. Axioms. Effect cannot be its own cause degrees. Thinking cannot be the knowing which it expresses degrees. The product of energy cannot be energy. The moving lever cannot be its own fulcrum degrees. Simulated idea and moving forms cannot be the conclusion. Creation is the product of God. 9s mind knowing degrees. It is made manifest pi mind thinking, the product of mind, created. The 2.ly_ of mind, cannot be the mind which created it degrees. As I said above, these definitions cannot define with comprehension unless amplified patiently, and simply, and with much repetition of example. This I will do in everyday language without the use of any scientific terminology whatsoever, for that is not necessary. If you will review the past lessons you will find that I have not yet used any scientific terms which are not a part of everyday common usage except possibly the word polarity degrees. Such words as gravitation are scientific terms which everybody understands, and such words only will be used. Universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 280. If, however, I am obliged to use any other words I will as clearly define them as I defined polarity to be the division of an equilibrium into pairs of opposite conditions degrees. You will never have to look up any strange word of the scientist's vocabulary in a terminology dictionary degrees before resuming our subject of energy which motivates the universal heartbeat. I wish you to realize that we have not yet complexed the foundations of scientific principle beyond the prin greater than pole of the Divine Trinity, nor will I do so unto the very end, for nature does not complex it. Nature multiplies the three of the Divine Trinity in two-wave octaves of 9, which are the same 3 multiplied by 3 to create the illusion of a three-dimensional universe by the seeming projection of light radially degrees. And so you will find the simplicity of 3 unto the very end in all things degrees. Waves of light are the very basic exemplification of the Divine Trinity, and the universe consists of light waves only. When we begin to build octave wave fields and explain wave structure you will find nothing more complex in principle than you are perfectly familiar with in the workings of the old-fashioned kitchen pump handle which our forefathers had to use constantly to pump water into the kitchen from the well. That principle is all that God or you have to use in creating material bodies, the principle of the Divine Trinity of energy and energy expression which underlies all unfolding refolding things. I am sure that you will not say that you cannot comprehend that simple principle of the pump degrees, therefore you can comprehend universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 281 the most complex electrical, chemical or mathematical effects, or how God unfolds and refolds suns and planets, by the same process and principle with which he unfolds and refolds the daisy in the meadow. You have always heard that matter emerges from space in some mysterious manner, and that space again swallows up matter and absorbs it into itself. That is true. But the way that matter emerges from space is the same way that the pump handle draws water from the well. The only difference is that there are hundreds of billions of wave pump handles pumping furiously in every cubic inch of matter to pump light out of the well of space, instead of water out of a well of earth. The motivating principle is the same, so also are the mechanics. I will now give you a series of simple ideas to ponder over, ideas which are steps in trying to comprehend how desire of mind manufactures thought-imaged bodies which are subsequently given material bodies. I use the word manufacture purposely, instead of creates, for the process is as much one of manufacture as any product of a factory is. By using this word, however, it will accentuate that fact to you, and I want it to do so for reasons which will be self-evident as we progress. I will number the ideas as we build up the structure of the whole process. Regarding the kitchen pump idea No. 1. I have diagrammed the pump handle in figure 28. Study it carefully and note that all of it moves lying down except one universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 282. Point marked A degrees. That one point is motionless, still unchanging. That still point is on the equator, which divides the polarity of its two compressed and expanded extensions, which I have marked B and C. That one still, immovable point is called the fulcrum, and the two extensions, which are the handle of the pump, are known as the lever. Idea No. 2. All of the energy which that moving pump handle -m_I is in its immovable fulcrum. Without the fulcrum there could be no motion to express power, therefore energy could not be 2.12.111121 A. Tide power of stillness. Idea No. 30. Ask yourself where you could logically place the source of expressed energy and the fulcrum and the lever. Could it possibly be in the moving lever if the lever could not move without a fulcrum? Your answer could only be that the energy is supplied in the fulcrum and extended to the lever to manifest the power of 4E fulcrum. Idea No. 40. In Fig. 29 I have diagrammed a wave. No matter whether it is a wave of water, a sound wave, a radio wave or the wave of an electric current, you will note that it is just like the fulcrum and lever which constitute a pump handle. Its fulcrum is fixed, immovable, still and unchanging. Its lever extends to both sides of its equator, wave axis, just as the lever of the pump handle extends degrees. Idea No. 50. Vision in your memory the troughs and crests of the familiar waves of the ocean, the crest of each wave. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 283, Fig. 34. Figure 35, Figure 36, Figure 37. Drawings exemplifying the principle of the Divine Trinity. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 284. Interchanges with the trough, which is its oppositely sex-conditioned mate. Troughs and crests are sequentially interchanging through their equators. Each alternately becomes the other but in reverse. Figure 30 is the pump handle showing its wave crest and trough reversed. Positive and negative conditions interchange at their equator and each become the other by reversing their direction of motion, just as life and death, and every other pair of opposites. Fig. 31 exemplifies the same principle in the wave. Idea number 6. If you comprehend how the pump principle works by thrusting a piston in one direction and pulling it back in the opposite direction, you can comprehend the heartbeats of this electric universe of light waves. For light waves pump in exactly the same way, the top of the pump handle is the crest of every electric wave, sound wave, radio wave, water wave or any other kind of wave. Idea No. 11. There is a piston on the wave of your pump handle which you can see, but there is an invisible piston on every wave of every kind in nature which you cannot see. Idea No. 80. In the undivided universe there are no waves, therefore there are no pistons, no polarization into pairs of opposite conditions. In such an equilibrium motion is impossible. For even the slightest motion means the development of polarity, and polarity means two unbalanced conditions which seek balance in each other through the motion of interchanging each other's condition. That search for balance through the motion of interchange is the expression of energy which is not in motion at all, Universal Laws, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 285. But is really in the equilibrium of the undivided universe. Degrees to illustrate my meaning, see Fig. Degrees 32 and 330. Fig. Degrees 32 represents the calm surface of the ocean. Degrees all of the ocean's energy is in that stillness, waiting to be expressed, just as all of the violence of exploding dynamite is in the unexploded stick, or as the whole oak tree is in its unfolded seed. Degrees the moment the equilibrium of the ocean is disturbed by being divided into two opposite conditions, the dynamic electric universe of two-way motion replaces the static condition of rest. Degrees electric wave pistons then pump all the energy measured out to them by the heartbeats of the universe. Each wave is geared to the universal heartbeat, so each wave then does its share in keeping this sexed electric universe of motion from disappearing into its own equilibrium, as it immediately would if all motion ceased. In Fig. Degrees 33 the same ships which floated motionlessly upon the undivided calm as in Fig. 32 are tossed about like matchsticks by the tremendous conflict which is now going on because of the sex passions of divided father and motherhood, of gravitation and radiation, which are seeking balance with each other through each other. What is actually happening is that the two unbalanced sex conditions are seeking avoidance of their opposed conditions by interchanging peculiar with each other. Degrees the divided seeks the undivided. Degrees when the two opposed conditions become undivided as one, their sex passions are satisfied. Fig. Degrees 32 represents this satisfied condition of an equilibrium in which motion is impossible. Degrees Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 286. In Fig. 32 every point upon the ocean's surface is equal in respect to both gravitation and radiation. Each point is the same distance from the Earth's center of gravity. That means that each point is 15 pounds pressure per square inch. Idea no. 9. The difference between the two effects in Figs. Law and 33 tell you what electricity is. Electricity is motion. Without motion there is no electric expression, no waves, no pistons, no pump. The measure of electric force expressed is the nature of the strains and tensions set up by dividing one condition into two, and an equal strain or tension in the desire of the two to become one. Electricity expresses itself in the north-south dynamic directions only. See Fig. 16 on page 175. The amplitude of wave of every nature points directly toward, and away from, the center of gravity. Falling rain, for example, falls directly toward the Earth's center, and rising water vapor returns upon the same radial lines. That is an expression of electrical energy, for the falling rain is charging the planet and discharging space, while the rising vapor is charging space and discharging the Earth. When water vapor rises to a level of equal pressure, it then floats upon its static diameter, which parallels the Earth's surface. Electric expression then ceases, for there are no waves, or wave pistons, on the static levels which are equal in distance from the Earth's center. Degrees ILE number 10. In order to better comprehend what I mean by the strains and stresses of electric pressures which cause sex, Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 287. Passion in nature. Imagine an elastic band stretching from the center of gravity to every point of an ocean wave. In a wave these elastics would be unequal in length, therefore there would be a greater strain on some than others. Upon the calm ocean there is no such inequality, therefore, there would be no unbalance. All stresses and strains would cease as though they never were. In your own business and social life you may express yourself as dynamically as you choose so long as you balance each opposite with the other, but the moment you unbalance them unequally you will have to pay the price of breaking God's inviolate law. Business or matrimonial sex unbalance suffer alike. Giving and re-giving must be equal and opposite, else businesses crash, homes break. 22. Friendships cease and many and varied ills affect the body, which could not have happened if giving and re-giving were all unbalanced. If your social, business or sex life is not balanced, you can never find rest, or peace, or happiness. That would be impossible, for any residue of unbalance, left over from your greatest efforts to balance them, would prevent your finding happiness, peace or rest. To express your life dynamically you must be strong in your knowing of God's law, otherwise it will react against you mightily. That is as true of the chemical elements or even of musical tones as it is of humans, for it is God's law and has no exceptions. If you do not balance your takings lie or fivings, that residue of unbalance will make happiness impossible, where, instead, universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 288, you may have the greatest of happiness by balancing them. In figure 34 we have an example of perfect balance which results from a perfectly balanced transaction in nature. It is a cube crystal of sodium chloride which is the result of a balanced union of sodium and chlorine as exemplified in figure 350. Sodium is the positive, and chlorine is the negative. They are perfectly balanced sex mates and their union voids both as dynamic opposites. The cube crystal exemplifies your happiness resulting from a B.length transaction. In it there is no residue of unbalance, as there is no residue of unbalance in your business and personal transactions when there is an equal interchange. Therefore peace, happiness, and health are only possible when one is spiritually and physically in balance. Sodium and iodine, or sodium and bromine, would make good mates, but in each would be a residue of unbalance which would show in their crystallization by distorted cubes of sodium iodide or sodium bromide. In Fig. 35 you will note that the static and dynamic diameters are 90 degrees from each other. In sodium iodide they would be less than 90, and in sodium bromide they would be less still. In the like residue of unbalance lies all of your troubles of business, health or social relations. With such a residue you are out of tune with yourself and all things else. While speaking about being out of tune with your environment or associates, I will use a musical tone to exemplify more specifically what I mean by the words residue of unbalance. Figure 36 represents the A string of a harp. That string is universal law, natural science and philosophy, page 289, only one of a whole octave group. If you pluck it as in Fig. 37, it will vibrate between its positive and negative divisions, as sodium and chlorine do in Fig. 350. The string is now expressing itself dynamically, for sound extends from its silence. Suppose, however, that its vibrations do not balance with the vibrations of the other strings of its octave, it is then out of tune with them. It can never be satisfied with its own accomplishments while that residue of unbalance remains. Conclusion: the reason I dwell upon these simple examples is because all nature repeats in its every phase the experiences of your own life. The more you know nature, its laws and processes, the more you can work knowingly with God. Life is hard only for the ignorant. The greater your knowledge of God's ways, the easier and more glorious your life can be. Many people are out of tune in their business, social and domestic life simply from ignorance of the essential knowledge for finding happiness. If you hear a piano which is badly out of tune, your senses are jarred. but many lives are very badly out of tune without doing anything about it. No one can live life gloriously without a workable philosophy. A philosophy which has a scientific basis will 12e2 lily you in the certainty of its practical workability. A religion which is in tune with the scientific philosophy will be like unto the North Star to a mariner. A religion which has but an emotional basis is a quicksand, but when you add knowledge to the highest of spiritual emotions, you are surely upon a solid universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 290. Rock with your eyes to the light instead of to the dark. There should be no guesswork about life. Guessing is the method of ignorance. No one need be ignorant. Everyone can have all knowledge, for all knowledge exists and is simple and is yours for the desiring. Information, techniques and skills are complex, but they are not knowledge. These alone will not lead you to the light. Until you do know the path to the light and walk it knowingly, one will travel many paths in the dark, and your flesh will be torn with thorns, and you will be low in spirit and shrouded with self-pity in the measure of your not knowing. I say to you, therefore, the more you make God's ways your ways, the more you will manifest God's power to live gloriously, prosperously, powerfully and with great happiness, for the path to the light is clear, and illumines all of your way if you but know the path. The following words from God's message will give spiritual force to my meaning, for I say that man who senses but clay of earth in him is bound to earth and clayed image of earth. Clayed images of my imagining who knoweth not me in them are but dwellers of earth's dark. To sensed man the doors of my kingdom are self-barred by darkness until the light of me in him is known by him as me. Until then he is but moving clay, manifesting not me in him while sense he ain't naught, but renoving registered clay of him, knowing not the glory of me light in him. Wherefore, I say to thee, exalt thou thyself beyond thy sensing, know me as fulcrum of thy thinking, be me as deep well of thy knowing, from the divine Iliad universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, S.C. D. Lesson number 18. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. First steps toward explaining the supreme mystery of life and death. The supreme mystery of life, growth, decay and death is the, as yet, greatest of all unanswered questions of the ages. It is so much a mystery that science has for centuries been trying to search for the secret of life in some basic, but hidden life germ. There is no such life germ. Life does not exist anywhere in matter, or bodies of matter. Life exists only in God, as mind desire to manifest idea by creating body forms which manifest idea. To the majority of mankind death is as much an accepted reality as life. To them I would be wasting words by saying there is no death. But to you, whose cosmic awareness is unfolding, I can say these words, and you will believe them intuitively, but you will not understand why, nor could you explain it dynamically to anyone. Yet this is the one thing you most want to know and be able to explain dynamically even to yourself. This I know because of the many questions the deepest thinkers ask me about life, death, 291 Universal Law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 292_-reincarnation, growth from the seed and other seemingly unfathomable mysteries. Platitudes, abstractions, affirmations, faith and belief without knowledge are not satisfying. Knowledge alone will satisfy. There is nothing difficult to understand about life and death because it is a manifestation of the most obvious thing in nature. Let us consider this. What is the most obvious things in nature? It is the cyclic repetition of the love principle of G_, N and Re giving as manifested in the Divine Trinity. This eternal repetition is the very basis of creation. Everything in nature appears, disappears, but reappears. That which comes must go, but it must come again forever. Day is born from night to become night. But night is not death, because it born day. Likewise death borns life, and life again horns death, as all opposite effects forever do. The concept of life and death grew out of the belief that our bodies are our personal selves, and that bodies live then cease to live. Our selves are eternal. Our personal selves have not been created. We but manifest ourselves in moving bodies by eternal repetition of bodies which we create to use as instruments until no longer they can function as bodies. Then we create another one. And we continue to do that until our purpose is fulfilled as individual units of creation. The only things which come in 13,2 are bodies. Bodies do not live nor do they die. They but function as tools for the length of their cycles, then wear out. Bodies are universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 293. But waves of motion, and motion is not life. Creation is an ever-renewing, ever-repeating bodily manifestation of mind thinking. Creating bodies manifest idea. But bodies are not the idea they manifest. Likewise bodies manifest life and death, but them are not life and death. Life and death are but thought cycles of concentrative thinking followed law decentrative thinking. Each is but one half of a cycle of electric wave motion. Motion does not live nor die, it but expresses life and death. One polarization and depolarization. Creation is but an electric wave record of thoughts. Zero thoughts do not live or die. Thoughts are mind expressions. Thoughts are but mind imaginings which come in F2,2 from their source in mind. But mind does not command. G2 for mind is eternal. God is mind and God alone lives. So God created his body, but he did not create LIFEO. He created bodies to manifest life and love which is in him, but the bodies he created are not God, nor do they live or die or love or have knowledge. He alone can die who believes in death. But he who knows the light of God is one with him can never die. This thought is so beautifully expressed by God's own word in the divine Iliad. He who seeks life without the light will find death, but he who seeks the light will find eternal life even when he walks toward death. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 294. He who knows not the light shall die to find it. But he who knows the light shall never die. In man S inhaling there is life, and death trails as exhaling, yet must man breathe in to live again and deeply in that he may die. Know thou then that I alone live. I do not die, but out of me comes both seeming life and death. Life is but the inward flow of my thinking's divided pulsing, but death is its outward flow. Know also that the divisions of 141 thinking are but equal halves of one, for I again say that I am one, and that all things which come from me are one, divided to appear as two. All things come and go from little divided thinking. All coming things are living things, and those which go are dead. Know thou that all creating things are resurrected from the dead, and dead things live again through lily divided thinking. Again I say, that all things are bound as one through light. I am forever creating living body and destroying it in seeming death that it may live in me to die and live again. The end of life and death is life's new beginning. Both life and death are one in me. All things are forever lying and forever dying, and while they live they die, and also while they are in death they live. Such is my decree, my universal law, from which there is no escape for man, or star, or grain of sand, for all things flow from me that they may pair to man, and return to me, that they universal law, natural science and philosophy page 295 may disappear from his senses in the cycle of Lized thinking. I am the repetitive God, all things which flow to me and from me flow again both ways through me forever in a cycle which ends not, nor has begun. From a right hand life flows one way and returns to me full spent as death, while full death flows the other way and returns to me renewed as life. Around my cycle both life and death wend their opposed ways, each seeking each until that way meet balanced at maturity, where each gives half to each. But when they pass that halfway point on their separate ways to me, each then gives thought to each, and then both know, as they return to me, that each are both, and both are one in me. Death is the seed of life. Death rebounds from death as life, from death life springs from the soil, and from life death flows even as the perfume leaves the rose. Death gives of itself to life that life may live, and likewise does life give to death that death may die. Life is regenerating death, and death is life degenerating. Light leaves thy sun as death and comes to thee as life, and when thy death leaves thee it likewise becomes new life to whom, of what, its impact quickens with thy death. Two ways there are of breath, the inward charging breath of life and the outward discharging breath of death. All opposed pairs of divided thinking pass in opposite ways along these two paths in the traversing of the cycle. All things which I have divided into pairs of opposites have a universal law, natural science and philosophy page 296 within them both life and death. But one of these is greater than the other until they meet as equals halfway around my life-death cycle. When once they meet, and pass, they then exchange these qualities, the greater growing lesser and the lesser growing greater, even though life is full when life is born, from life itself as death, and takes the opposite path toward the LH. Likewise does life emanate from death to weaken it when life is strong, until life conquers death to make death live as life. Verily I say, life cannot live without dying as it lives, nor can death conquer life and gather naught to it but death. Life is charging breath of compressive action, and death is my discharging, opposed breath which expands as life degrees as reaction. Hear thou me when I again say that life and death are opposites which pass each other on going opposite ways. Life attracts life to life be its contraction, and death repels both death and life be its expansion. I am not life, nor am I death. From me both spring, and through me both flow both ways toward unity. First in Klee manifests itself and then in me, yet am I not touched in both their passings. I am the interchanging point of life and death. I balance life with death, and never in their changing can either death or life outbalance death or life. Write thou that death and life are one, as the swinging universal law, natural science and philosophy page 297 pendulum is one, e'en though it oscillates two ways in its incessant swingings. He who travels east in mere curved universe arrives at west as surely as he who travels west. Likewise does life travel the eastern road to arrive at death, while death takes the eastern road where life awaits to quicken death as life degrees, so also does death trail the road of life to interchange with life, while life likewise trails the road of death to find itself through death. Hear thou me say there is no death in all my imagined universe degrees, and it is naught but life. For naught but life and love is in me, and my knowing degrees naught is there in thinking which is not my knowing, and naught but life and love are in thinking degrees. Take thou man's death away from him in this new day of man, give him eternal life in me by knowing me, and high are 6 degrees from Divine Iliad Analysis of the Life-Death Cycle P1. When I wrote these immortal words of our Father Mother Vlim the Light with him, I was fully aware of their dynamic meaning and the mechanics of his thinking processes by means of which he manifested his idea and formed bodies which come, and go, and come again forever degrees. I fully knew that any idea which comes and goes is one in both its coming and going degrees. In my full knowing I could not differentiate one from the other, therefore I could not differentiate universal law, natural science and philosophy. Page 298. Life from death nor death from life. To me the morning light of day which walks toward noon is the same light which walks away from noon to again be the morning light to walk again toward noon, knowing the cause of undivided light of the sun which has no morning, noon nor night in its eternal unchanging oneness, and knowing that the divided, ever-changing day of earth is but extended from its undivided cause, I knew both life and death for what they were, and not for what seemed to be, to you, however, who read these immortal words without that knowing. They are but words until your soul knows their meaning in God's plan, which simulates eternity by dividing all idea of His into pairs of opposite expressions which eternally repeat their opposite expressions to create an illusion of continual change. That is what confuses you and all mankind. You see the continual change in every moment of the day, and every form in it, and of every event in it. Something is moving and changing during 7 whole day and night of life to force you to think complexly. You cannot evade that confusion while your senses record ILA 124 T2 but changing. Confusion of the senses disappears through knowing the changeless source of all illusion. To the extent that Y212. Know the source, the confusion of your senses will disappear. The reason God gave you the Divine Iliad message is to give you that knowing, and the purpose of it is the further unfolding of the man idea upon this planet. In order to give you that knowing you must discard age-old universal law, natural science and philosophy. Page 299. Concepts which your senses have built up from the confusion of change, and replace them with new concepts formed from knowing the changeless source of undivided oneness from which the divided universe of many changing, moving forms extend. In order to build these new concepts we must become thoroughly familiar with the way God extends all changing forms of divided idea from their changeless source in His light. We will do that by the repeated use of diagrams and word pictures of simple examples of forever changing things which manifest eternal life by life's division into seeming life and death. In beginning to explain the principle which lies behind life and death, let me remind you that creation is the extension of God's one whole idea divided into countless many forms of many ideas imagined by mind thinking. The form of any idea is not the idea thus extended, it is but the material body of the idea. Idea is undivided and changeless. Idea has no body. Thinkins takes idea apart and gives it thought bodies which are then manifested in material bodies. Idea does not come and go, it is but the bodies of ideas which come and go. It is but the formed bodies of ideas which appear, disappear and reappear in what we call life, death and rebirth. These transient bodies simulate idea by form and motion, but transient moving form cannot be the eternal idea which it manifests in forever repeated cycles. Remember then, that it is the repeated cycles of manifested ideas which confuses you into thinking life and death, and not universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 300. The idea itself. Idea is eternal and has no cycles. The B0DIES of ideas only are expressed in cycles. Cycles come in G2TH2Y, begin and end, and begin again where they end. They appear and disappear to reappear as bodies of patterned thoughts. It will clarify this life-death mystery to go through the process of building bodies from the eternal zero in the light of their beginning, through the cycle of their appearance, and back into their disappearance in their eternal zero of equilibrium from which they emerged. We will first build the body of a tree from its beginning as a part of God's one whole idea of creation. We plant an acorn seed in the ground. In that seed is 1,000,000 years of repeated life-death cycles. In that seed is the record of every stage of unfolding of that idea from its beginning as a mold, or fungus, up through the stages of desire to become what it desired to be, which was in that seed 1,000,000 years ago. Examine it with the finest microscope and you will not see one trace of the body of an oak, yet out of it comes the full-grown oak of many branches and leaves, no two of them alike. That seed is the undivided father-mother idea of the eternal oak, which is about to be divided into pairs of opposite father and mother conditions, which produce bodies by interchanging their conditions. All creating bodies begin from a zero point of balance, which become their equators, extend to allotted measures limited by desire, and return to the zero of their equators to give back their universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 301. Bodies they have borrowed from each side of it. Let me impress upon you the fact that the seed is but the sole record of mind idea. It has no material body, but it has a thought body which is to altered in the image of the thought. It is the mind constitutive of an oak tree not yet conceived as a body in its mother's womb. By saying that it is not yet conceived in its mother's womb, I mean that it has not yet begun to be divided from its spiritual oneness of father-motherhood into its physical manifestation of the Divine Trinity as expressed by the division into father and motherhood. Fig. 38 represents the beginning of this division by planting the patterned seed in the womb of Mother Earth. Figure 39 represents the static measure of desire for extension which is in the seed. The zero of the seed centers the two equilibrium zeros extended from it. The seed is the still fulcrum from which the tree will borrow its power to become a tree, as the lever likewise borrows its power from its fulcrum. It must be thoroughly known and comprehended that the dimensions of the full-grown tree, including the duration of its life cycle, are as meticulously recorded in its seed as are the patterns of its wood and foliage. That which appears to exist in the visible universe really exists in the invisible universe. The invisible idea is eternal. The moment the division of the seed takes place, the dimension of its former incarnations are already surveyed by the magnetic surveyor of Creatlon and invisibly marked out for it upon both sides of its equator. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 302. Ismpimpamimpcam.a.mo. Fig. 40, therefore, represents the dimension of the two-way dynamic diameter extending at 90 degrees from the static diameter of Earth degrees. The dynamic diameter is the equator which is being prepared in Earth and space, which divides, balances and reverses the halves of the growing body. To review this idea in your mind, turn back to Fig. 20 degrees. Fig. 41 represents the two extended static diameters which bound the predestined dimensions of the tree in accord with the dimensions of desire which have been registered in its seed degrees. It can go beyond these dimensions if new desire is added to the seed, such as extra favorable soil, and weather conditions degrees. This added desire can be given to it by a man who adds his desire for a better tree to that of the desire of the tree. In Fig. 41 the division has already taken place and the newborn tree has extended from its womb in the negative direction of motherhood toward space, while its roots have extended in the positive direction of gravitation toward fatherhood degrees. The important facts for you to take note of at this stage are these. 1. The division which begins to take place in the seed by the electric pumping action develops a negative and positive, polarized, condition above and below the equator where the division begins degrees. 2. The positive direction of concentration is inward toward gravity degrees. The roots of the tree follow that direction. The negative direction of decentration is outward toward space. The growing tree follows this outward direction degrees. 3. Now carefully note the fact that positive electricity and Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 303. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 304. Negative electricity turn their backs to each other and pull away from each other as hard as they can to divide a static condition into a dynamic one. This is a very important point for you to take note of, because science believes just the opposite of what nature so obviously and plainly demonstrates. In fact, the Coulomb electric law states that opposites attract and likes repel degrees. As we proceed you will see how utterly unlike nature that law is. Electricity is the divider of one balanced, unchanging condition stillness into two unbalanced conditions of ever-changing motion, which interchanges constantly to balance those unbalanced conditions, to express life and to void them, to express death. Positive electricity and negative electricity are diametrically opposed to each other. Positive electricity charges by multiplying motion into higher potential to manifest life, and negative electricity discharges that potential clay, dividing it to manifest death. This is not the proper place to expand this idea, but if you will look at a bar magnet you will find that it does just what the seed of the tree does. The electric current which divides the seed at its equilibrium point to pull one half of the tree inward to the positive center of the heart and the other half outward toward the negative area of the skies does exactly the same thing to a bar magnet. Fig. 42 represents a bar magnet, which is a prototype of all growing things. It is a division of stillness into polarized motion. The electric current which polarized the bar magnet. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 305, pushed both poles away from each other as far as they would go. Positive and negative electricity turn their backs upon each other at their starting point. That is what polarity is, a division into pairs of opposite directions of motion, which create opposite conditions and opposites oppose. If they attracted each other, their opposite poles would be in the middle of the bar, not at its ends and straining to go farther. See Fig. 43. The workings of electricity have been grossly misunderstood, which is very strange, for man has known how to use it wonderfully, but has practically no knowledge of what it is, or the why of it. Is just as necessary for Y0U to fully understand its workings as for the greatest scientist in the world, because electricity is the pump which motivates your body, and it is what you use to think with. Electricity manifests the basic principle of creation, the L0VP. Principle of E equal Glaugen Reg giving, which is the principle of balance upon which your every thought and action is based. For, as the tree grows two ways to manifest life, it is gradually approaching the 2 points marked A in Figs. 41 and 44, where that which we call life ends and death begins. 5. As the tree grows by unfolding outward from its seed, it simultaneous/7 refolds inward toward its seed degrees. The pattern of every action of the tree is recorded in the magnetic light of its seed degrees. Later on you will marvel at this miracle of God's recording system, by means of which every unfolding idea is carried over from one body to another for ages. This recording system will be universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 306, explained in detail in later lessons. 6. Registered in the divided universe, 1/2 of every creating thing is on the positive side of its equator and the other half on its opposite side. Each of these is dependent upon the other. That part of the tree which is under the ground interchanges with the part which is above ground. This is as true of a man, or planet, or industrial plant as it is of a tree. 7. The underground half is the forming body in the womb of earth, and the upper half is the forming seed pattern which returns to the womb of earth for reborning. 8. When the full-grown tree, or man or planet, has reached the limits of its generating powers, it then begins to degenerate. To generate means to increase its polarizing power. To degenerate means a gradual depolarization. Figures 45 and 46 represent this gradual depolarization which takes place as desire weakens to manifest idea in body form. Fig. 47 represents the complete refoldment of the idea of that tree to its seed. Depolarization is complete. That desire to divide the undivided is now at rest in the patterned record of its seed, just as it was in Figure 38. Conclusion. If you will now read God's words at the beginning of this chapter, you will understand them better because of these diagrams explaining the growth and decay of a tree. Meditate deeply upon this subject and you will find that there is no part of this journey of the tree from its appearance to its disappearance that you could call life without as universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 307, appropriately and truthfully calling it death. Nor is there any part of it that you could call its beginning or its end. Nor is the fulcrum which the tree used to extend itself into a tree any different from the fulcrum you used to extend yourself into a man degrees, nor are you freed from your roots underground because you can walk away from them, for you are as much bound to them as the tree is. We will talk about this in the next lesson. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, Say, D. Lesson number 19. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. Continuing the mystery of life and death. During the whole course of these lessons we have endeavored to accentuate the underlying simplicity of nature and natural law and constantly repeat and exemplify the fact that every expression of motion in every creating thing is identical. Not only is every phenomenon of motion identical in principle but in the mechanics of its operation. The Divine Trinity is never varied in any action-reaction cycle, nor is its one purpose of physical expression ever varied. The purpose of all creative expression is the manifestation of the love principle of balance giving and giving. The manifestation of that principle is the very purpose for which God created his universal body, the measure in which nature and man balance their givings from one side of any equator to their mates upon the other side of it, is the measure of peace, happiness, power, beauty and order liners which working knowingly with the law gives to man, instead of the chaos and lives of those who work against it. The keystone of the entire structure of the spiritual and 309 Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 310. Physical universe is rhythmic balanced interchange between all opposite mates degrees. This is God's three-word law for the cosmic age of man. We have exemplified the workings of this law in the unfolding of an oak tree from its seed, the interchange between that part of the tree which belonged to earth and that part which belonged to the heavens until its complete refolding into its seed degrees. We have shown how absolutely dependent each opposite half is below the other half on the other side of their common equator which divides them from their unity into polarized halves. We have demonstrated the increasing power to express life through increasing intensity of polarization, as positive and negative electricity gather, to continue to extend in opposite directions, and the sequential increase of power to express death as depolarization gradually voids both poles by weakening their power to divide. This process has clarified the fact that the tree could multiply its power only by giving, in order that that which it unfolded would be refolded for repeated giving. The tree is rooted to the ground, but man is, seemingly, not so rooted. The growth of a tree seems to exemplify something quite different in principle than the growth of a man, or a bussy nest degrees, in order that such thought will not complex your thinking and lead you away from the simplicity of the identical manner in which the Divine Trinity is expressed in all things. I will give you two more parallel examples at the end of this lesson, that of a man and the growth of a bank degrees. You will see that there is not Rummell's law, Natural Science and Philosophy. Page 311, equals. meters 4 equals equals 0 liters equals memoirmim.mo.com. The slightest variation in either the principle or its mechanics in these two other expressions of idea which are identically repeated in all other expressions. Before we give these examples, however, I will quote our Father-Mother's words given in his cosmic message to this new age of man now dawning. From the Book of Desire, Chap. 2:2. Heed thee thy desires lest they be unlawful. Measure, to thy desires carefully against their opposites, lest unbalanced desires breed their unbalanced kind to arise and smite thee. 34. Again I say, only one principle of my one law is founded upon the solid rock as equal interchange between all pairs of opposite things, opposite conditions or opposite transactions between men. 40. Evil must prevail on earth as it is in heaven. That which I divide to give to earths and their surrounding heavens is equal. 5. That which earths give to their surrounding space equals answers that which space gives to earths. By the word earths our Father means the half of each wave field which has concentrated light waves into solid bodies by pulling centripetally inward from within, and by heavens he means the other half on the other side of their equator which has decentrated into space surrounding the centering solid. Our Father-Mother has divided his entire universe into wave fields within wave fields, a wave field for each action in its own measure, and the electric power extended to each wave field. Universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy. Page 312 is equally divided between the centering solid and the space which surrounds it. Each wave field is a complete storage battery like the one in your car. The only difference being that the negative cells of nature's storage batteries are many thousands of times larger than the positive cells. Illusion in the making. Each wave field is surrounded, and bounded by 6 mirrors which form a cube of 6 planes of zero curvature beyond which any action taking place in any wave field cannot go. Within these cube wave fields is an entire microcosmic or macrocosmic curved universe of curved pressure gradients which act as lenses to project and retract light wave actions and reactions which take place within each wave field. These countless cubes of space are the projection machines which extend the cosmic cinema upon the imagined screen of space. Each action of each person, planet or atom affects the balanced symmetry of its wave field. Unbalance distorts the field in the measure of its unbalance. This is not the place to expand this idea here, but the fact of it must be stated here to await its further dynamic expression. We will demonstrate, through chemistry and wave construction, how unbalance and mismatings result in slight to violent distortions from which our explosives emerge. Each man is forever building his own balanced or distorted wave field from which he projects his distortions and reflects others. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 313. Every unbalanced projection reflects its discord back to its source to hurt him who projects it. No projected distortion can pass beyond the insulating planes of zero curvature which bound every balanced wave field, but every distorted projection can, and does reflect its distortions into the distortions of other wave fields. Remember, however, that God will not allow unbalance in his universe. No man can hurt another without the other's consent. No man can upset the balance of the universe even though extended distortions engulf whole nations with their self-made distortions. Man is eternal. Remember, also, that eternal perfect man centers man's bodies, and bodies alone are affected by the actions and reactions of motion. Emma and Ninabine can never be affected, but he can seem to be by the effect of other actions upon his body as the measure of his acceptance of other actions or of his power to insulate his body from them as his being is eternally insulated from them. What I am trying to tell you is that the eternal Y0U dwells in the undivided, unchanging universe, but your body, with which you manifest the eternal Y0U, dwells in the divided universe of two unbalanced conditions which must forever change by interchange of one condition with the other to simulate the one from which both extended degrees. Our Father-Mother's teachings in his message so beautifully clarify his principle of balance in respect to our present subject that I will quote them direct. These also are from T. Book of Lao-Tzu, Chap. 3. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 314. The word 40. He who discords the patterns of my balanced will discords his very seed. Its rhythms he must make absolutine as the disturbed rhythms of earth's storms must be made absolute. From this, my decree, there is no escape for man, nor star, nor galaxy and universe which I imagined into seeming being to manifest me. 50. Balance thy desires and they will bless thee with multiples of their kind. Beware lest thy A 112, G shall outweigh thy giving and gain thee naught. Chap. 4:1. Consider well well, disregard it not, for thou shalt well pay heavily for e'en 1 whit of its breaching. 2. For I am balance, as heavens and earths of a balanced radial body vary not 1 whit in their rhythmic balance, so shall man vary not 1 whit. 3. Unknowing man unthinkingly counts upon his own power to set aside one law to fit the measure of his desires, but, I say, alone hold balance. 40. Man walks through his cycles upon a tautened rope, where'er his foot toucheth I am there, giving him foothold as the fulcrum of his effort. 5. From my rest at the fulcrum he taketh the power I give to him to express his desire, without me he can do naught. 6. And behold me at each end of the lever of his action to balance his unbalancing in my universe which knows no unbalance. 70. Yea, be it known that 2 eyes of man's very God watch o'er each action of each man whose body my body is. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy page 315-8. And if man would know where those two eyes of his God are located, I say, seek them at each end of his wavering pole which keepeth him upright upon his taut and 10. 9. For man cannot be without me e'en though he deny me in 10. Have a care, therefore, that desires of man for things of earth be balanced _law desires for heavenly blessings, without which man path not. Chap. v. 20 say to man these very words. 30. Behold in me the fulcrum of my changing universe which but manifests change, though I change not, nor move, for I am rest. In me alone is balance. 50. He who would find power must know that he extends from rest in me, that I am he. 6. He who would find rest must return to me, be fulcrum of his own rover. 00000. Therefore I say, the burdens of man are made be man in the image of his unbalanced thinking. Likewise the illnesses of man are fruits of his own making. Balanced thinking is an ecstasy which knows no burden, no fatigue nor imperfection. From man's own unbalanced thinking emanates the toxins of fatigue, and divers sicknesses, and fears. 200. Wherefore I say, come unto me, ye self-burdened, find rest in me by 1,22.1.11e. Me, Universal Laws. Natural Science and Philosophy page 316. Balance further exemplified, since it is that balance is the very foundation of the undivided universe of mind, and divided balance is the foundation of the universe of motion. It is necessary that we continue with enough examples of a varied nature to demonstrate the conspicuous fact that equal division of action and reaction demands equal interchange of giving and regiving to opposite mates by each other. It is difficult to realize that we are either making happiness or unhappiness for ourselves by our own balanced or unbalanced relations with our close associates. We give too little thought to the things we say and do to our friends and neighbors in our social and business relations. Humans seem to be almost thoughtless about the little things they do to kill the thing they love, by hurting a friend or loved one by careless, or thoughtless speech which may have not the least trace of viciousness in it, or intent to hurt, but which, nevertheless, causes the loss of a friend of long standing. Many lonely people wonder why they are not loved and respected by their neighbors as John Smith is, across the street. Such lonely ones hardly realize that the accumulated thousands of little unbalanced actions, dealings and thoughtlessly spoken words have repelled people by driving them slowly, but surely away from them. I cannot too often remind you that God gives love alone to all his universe. The more we can learn to give naught but love to our neighbor, the more loving, loyal friends we will have, and universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 317. The more we will prosper, for prosperity is as impossible without friendly 221 will as happiness is impossible if cultivated with intolerance, cynicism, gossip, or other unkindly actions. Divided bodies. We whose bodies are divided to manifest our undivided selves, have never realized that one half of our body is above ground and the other half is below ground, just as the tree is. Neither do we realize that we are constantly interchanging with each half. Our roots underground are not fastened to us as they are to the tree, but the system of interchange from seed to seed is the same. Note the analogy and similarity of process in each. The seed of all things is planted in the body of the earth or an extension of it, to act as womb for the beginning of the polarization which divides the thought body, as registered in the seed, into two conditions, one which reaches out toward the heavens to manifest the unfolding process which expresses motherhood, and the other which reaches inward toward gravitative pressures to manifest the refolding process of expressing fatherhood. The surface of the earth is the static equator from which all of its extensions emerge. All creating extensions are likewise divided by an equator which balances the two through interchange. The entire expression of a whole life cycle deals with what happens to a body after polarization begins, for all happenings after that which affect growing body pattern are the direct result of whatever interchange takes place between the body of the man tree rhinoceros or ant which is above ground with its own roots underground and the bodies of other extensions of the universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 318 Earth which have also become similarly divided, and especially of our own made of opposite sex from whom each of us is similarly divided by a dynamic equator. For many long eons the interchange is purely physical. It is confined solely to bodies which interchange willingly or otherwise for the self-perpetuation of each. After many eons, however, culture begins in man. He becomes aware of his spiritual altar. He is no longer merely a sensed animal. There comes a time when intelligence begins in him. Mental interchange then follows and with it the unfolding of character, culture, morals and the God qualities which man eventually recognizes as the source of him. In relation to motion the fact which needs to be impressed upon you is that the motion required for any and all interchange is due to the process of polarization and depolarization only. Thinking mind concentrates and decentrates. That is what polarization is. That is fiat electricity is. That is what vibration is and waves are vibrations. That is what divides the undivided, changes the unchanging, makes measure where no measure is, makes motion where naught but stillness is, makes sound to come out of silence and forms to appear by countless millions from the formlessness of their seed idea. That motion needed for interchange between opposites occupies the attention of all people. Motion seemingly is of greatest importance. Hear me when I now say to you motion is of the least important universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy page 319 Waves of motion are but the outward bodies, the shells which contain the pearls of great price. Degrees they are but the senses which vibrate to give physical form to immortal thoughts. Degrees they are but sounds projected to simulate the glory which the light of God's kingdom of mind knowing is. Motion translates idea into thought bodies, then into material bodies. Degrees motion records its every pulsation forever as memories for eternal repetition. Degrees this important subject will be gradually infiltrated in the lessons as we proceed, for when you fully comprehend God's bookkeeping system you will then know how all future unfoldings of all idea are built upon memories of past unfolding refolding experiences which are recorded in light wave patterns by nature. A full scientific knowledge of God's electric recording system will dispel the so far insoluble mysteries which lie hidden behind the secrets of instinct, memory, growth, evolution, which really means unfolding of that which is, and not something being added to that which was, reincarnation and an inexplicable idea which the ancient mystics called karma. Degrees philosophers and scientists have long wondered how the salmon finds its birthplace to spawn after wandering thousands of miles in trackless oceans, and 1,000 other such mysteries. Degrees these mysteries are quite simple of comprehension when one fully comprehends how God knits all patterned bodies from light waves with two forever interchanging knitting needles for which God has but two names, Father and Mother. Degrees if you could but visualize the Creator at work, weaving his universe of patterned forms in threads of light of all the colors. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 320 of the Spectrum. As a tapestry weaver works with many colored threads, you would see that God uses two needles, both of which are tipped with white golden light of incandescence at the ends where both meet. One of the needles of light extends from that golden incandescence into the dark of space through the orange and red side of the spectrum to manifest the fatherhood of creation, and the other extends through the green and blue side of the spectrum to manifest creation's motherhood. If you will observe the manner in which the Creator holds these needles, you will see that they converge and diverge radially in the form of a cone, and that all of his weavings are spirals which lead toward the apices of cones and away from them toward their bases. In this manner the Creator weaves his patterns of light solids surrounded by dark space, forever accompanied by the balanced rhythms of the universal heartbeat. Man has so many other names for God's instruments of creation that their real meaning is lost in the confusion of so many comics. The scientist calls them gravitation and radiation, not even knowing their father-mother connotation. The engineer calls them compression and expansion. The thinker names them concentration and decentration, while the world still continues to call them life and death. The two-way motion which begins to manifest the oak tree, when the seed thought body of the oak expresses its desire to 121,E1 a body for itself, could never have begun without the desire, and the patterned concept, which extends from the seed as two-way motion. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 321. The idea and the desire are of first importance. The only thing of importance to you about motion is what you do with it. Do you do with it what nature does with it? Nature remembers it, adds improvements to it, and repeats it forever by countless millions of repeated unfoldings and refoldings. Or do you go your own way without considering what control God has over what you are doing? Do you remember your experiences in the use of motion and profit them as nature does to improve its unfolding ideas, or do you ignore them and pay heavily for it and then wonder why you pay? If you desire to clean your room, write a book or operate a bank, you can express the desire only through motion. The resultant effect is an exact record of what you yourself are, and that pattern picture of you is recorded in space forever for endless repetition. The seed pattern of you is forever existent. In it is the measure of your love, your knowing, your character, and your achieve. Hence as a being degrees you yourself form the pattern of your own seed, and you, yourself, repolarize it with desire which is also in your seed. This you cannot avoid doing, and whatever you do can be expressed only by two-way motion extending from your centering, will. All motion of God's thinking expresses but one thing: love. Degrees to the extent that Y0 you are thinking manifests love, you are nearing the kingdom of heaven where all things else will be added unto you. What you are depends upon what you know. What the world. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 322 knows of you depends upon what you do with what you know. You can be a world genius without the world knowing anything about it until you express your genius through motion. What you know and what you are can become a part of creation, dividing what you know and what you are into invisible thought bodies for your own unfolding, and then giving those thought bodies to the world, polarizing them from their seed in you. Through motion alone we can extend ourselves from our seed to make a body, and from that body we can extend our knowing to all the world. But motion is only our servant, it does nothing of itself. Our use of it, however, in balance or out of balance, can uplift us to the highest pinnacles of earth or plunge us into the deepest abyss. It should be our greatest desire to learn how to divide our actions in such a manner that the half which belongs to heaven is equal to that half which is given to earth. Our happiness and prosperity in life depends absolutely upon how we divide our actions in respect to God's universe and to our fellow man. For in rhythmic balanced interchange between all opposites and every transaction in nature lies the secret of maximum perfection in any of its manifestations. Conclusion. Figures 38 to 47 depict the physical growth of a tree. In them the manifestation of balance and the division of the physical body is exemplified by equal polarization to that half of the body which earth extended to the heavens and that half which it retained for earth. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 323. The perfection of either half depends upon equality with the giving of each half to the other. If the roots deny moisture to the leaves and branches and the tree becomes stunted or malformed because of that denial, the roots themselves become stunted by the reaction of that denial from the branches, for their inability to drink in the sunshine from the heavens has been proportionately lessened. Equal interchange between roots and tree would ensure maximum perfection of a material body for the tree. If we apply exactly the same principle to the physical body of a man as we do to the tree, the perfection of his physical body will be maximum. We must not think of man as being separated from the earth just because he is not directly rooted to it and can walk the earth while the tree cannot. The body of the polarized seed of man extends from the womb of earth as surely as the tree extends from it, for his mother's womb is but an extension of earth. Polarization is a two-way, two-directional extension. The body of the man is always as much under the earth from which it was borrowed as the body of the tree is. Man cannot continue to be an extension of earth without drawing sustenance from his own roots which extend beneath the earth. Upon that continued interchange and upon the balance which the earth and heaven halves of man continue to give to each other, depends the balanced perfection of the physical body of man. The very sap of man's body comes from the waters of earth as the fibers of it come from fiber of earth. That is one reason why it is becoming more and more necessary. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 324, to consider the lack of balance in Earth's giving to man because of the use of mineral fertilizers and other damaging practices of agriculture. Our bodies are deficient to the extent that Earth's giving to them is deficient. The reaction of deficient giving to man by Earth lessens the ability of man to give to Earth. This law of equal interchange works both ways. Man is continually borrowing his body from earth and is just as continually returning his borrowings by the continual ejection of parts of it which are forever dying as new parts are borning. Your dog can follow your path for days because of the millions of dead cells which you have thrown off. That odor of you is a part of your ever-dying body, just as the perfume of a flower is a part of the dying flower. All eliminations of bodies are given back to earth for continuous repetition of givings and regivings. Earth is the positive cell of a battery and space is the negative cell. When earth gives half of a body to space, earth charges space and discharges itself equally. As space gives to the other half of the body, it recharges earth and discharges space. Perfection in the manifestation of any idea depends upon keeping this interchange in balance. Deficient interchange unbalances both, resulting in a less fertile earth and a less vital body of man. It is time that this matter became a major project in the practice of agriculture, else the human race will pay heavily for it. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 325. Unlike the tree, man has a spiritual existence as well as a physical one. His spiritual interchange and his human relations must equally obey the law of rhythmic balanced interchange, else his spiritual unfoldment will suffer vitally from the accumulating residues of unbalance which lodge in him by every unbalanced mental transaction of his life. The tree has only its physical body to interchange with, but man has both physical and mental unbalance in dealings reacts upon the physical by developing toxic poisonings which the balanced givings of earth to bodies could never offset. A perfect diet man will not keep him from hurting his own body by an unkind word given to hurt another, or by an unloving action of a nature whatsoever. That is why it is so much more difficult for man to live more healthily and happily than animals, and that is also why life is hard to live for all men who do not walk and talk with God. This is a universe of rest from which motion springs, but there is no rest for jolly man whose interchange with other men is unbalanced. The life of such a man is hard in the measure of his unbalanced interchange. Conversely, the life of any man who works knowingly with God and balances his mental and physical interchange is relatively easy, for such a man will forever know rest and peace, and the world will glorify him the more he reflects the light of love in his actions. As a final example, we will consider this law of equal interchange in a business transaction between men who operate a bank. Again I say that every diagram from 38 to 1+7 which applies the universal law, natural science and philosophy page 326 to the growing tree also applies to the operation and growth of a bank. The bank idea is a part of the whole idea of creation, just as the oak tree is another idea. The plan and pattern of the bank idea is in its seed. The bank begins to grow from its seed by dividing its substance into its two polar conditions, just as the tree begins to grow. So long as its capital is static in its seed, the bank cannot grow. In order to grow, it must become dynamic by extending in opposite directions from its equator, and those extensions must be equal. The growth of the bank begins when it extends credit to a borrower to make a body for the borrower's idea, just as the oak tree makes a body for its idea by borrowing it from below its equator. If the extended credit above the equator is $100,000, a simultaneous debit of $100,000 is recorded below the equator. That interchange is equal and opposite and is always kept in bold. Every reduction or increase on the credit side of the equator is balanced on its debit side. Suppose, however, that the creditor failed. After repaying $40,000, there would then remain a deficit of $60,000, which illustrates what we mean by a residue of unbalance. One such failure upon the part of the bank to give more care to investigation of the borrower, or one such accidental failure on the part of a sound borrower, would not destroy the bank, for it is too small a thing to hurt a strong bank. The accumulation of very many such unbalanced residues would, however, temporarily. Universal law, natural science and philosophy page 327 weaken it by hurting its growth and prestige, and would eventually destroy it unless the rhythmic balance of credits and debits was restored. If you would take this example to yourself and apply it all down the line to your physical interchanging with material bodies of earth and spiritual interchanging with thought bodies of heaven, you would find that seemingly insurmountable hurdles of life would be but molehills for your joyous overcoming, and ills of the body would not touch you degrees, and if they did, you would know that your self caused them little unnoticed accumulations of unbalanced residues degrees, knowing that you would talk to God about it in your meditations and thus take on His rest and peace, which would soon normalize your balance and attune it to the rhythms of God's heartbeat. I say to you, therefore, That knowledge of your physical and spiritual relationship to God and His universe gives you a power to meet the many great problems of life, to face its many hurdles fearlessly, and find your path upward to your own desired mountaintop unerringly, that is denied to those of lesser knowing degrees. Find, therefore, within yourself, the fulcrum of your own power. Find it by seeking deeper knowing. All knowledge exists degrees, it is yours for the desiring. Likewise all power exists, it is also yours for the asking. There is naught but good in all God's universe. If you find other than good anywhere, you have made it yourself. God did not make it, or live it to you. God is love and He gives naught but love to you. Degrees. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy by Walter Russell, S.C. D. Lesson Number 20. The Walter Russell Foundation, Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Copyrighted 1951 by Walter and Lau Russell. Students. Upper questions answered. It is deeply gratifying to us that more and more students are finding that the answers to all situations in which they find themselves are within themselves. When you realize that going outside of your consciousness in the direction of your senses, or the senses of any other person to whom you may appeal, is the surest way to defeat your purpose and complex your problem, you will ultimately learn the wisdom of seeking the answers to all questions within yourself. That is what we mean by asking God for a solution. Always develop the habit of thinking toward the source of knowledge, not away from it. If you want more water, you do not pump it from the little pools which have been pumped from the well. You seek the unlimited supply and pump it from its source. It might help you to develop this habit of inner thinking if you will visualize the seat of your consciousness as that still magnetic light which centers its two polarized extensions in the two lobes of your brain. Often when I think of God's words and the divine Iliad message which say, "See me, know me, be thou fulcrum of thine own." 329. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 330. Power. I think of that light of universal consciousness which is in the center of my head, and it makes me stop thinking and realize that all the knowledge there is in the whole universe is there in that measureless point of stillness in the center of my head. Then I also realize that all the power that is in the whole universe is in that still fulcrum from which the divided wave lever of 21 thinking extends. Degrees. An overwhelming realization of my universality and oneness brings with God, with it timeless answers to desired questions. That is the greatest way I know to make you forget your body and to realize God's existence at a still point within yourself which you can locate as Y0UH being, and God's being. Degrees. How often have I completely lost my body and found my soul that way? Degrees. How wonderful it will be for you when you can likewise think of the light of all-knowing as centered in Y0UAL0NE. For in you is all that is when you know the light that way. Degrees. The diagram numbered 15 on page 171 will help you to visualize yourself as the universal being from which all things extend. Your own thoughts are extensions of your consciousness, so, likewise, are all other people's thoughts. Degrees. Think, therefore, within your own thoughts for the light of all-knowing to extend outward to your own thoughts after you get something to extend, but not before. If the answer is not in your thoughts, you cannot get it from them. Go, therefore, to the source of thought with full confidence and realization that you will have your answer, just as you go to universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 331. The well for more water, and not to the various little cups and dishes which have a limited supply in them. When you are seeking an abundant flow of living waters from their unlimited source in the well degrees, you do not inspire increasing respect in your neighbor when you betray your weakness to him by asking him what you yourself know but are not aware of. Degrees, your creation is already falling to pieces the very instant that Y_21.1 are no longer creator of it. Degrees, if you are working in the light of your all-knowing, you are working with God. Degrees, go to him, not away from him, as you would go to the well if you want water, and not away from it. That is why I say never ask outside of yourself for a solution which is within yourself. Degrees, if you ask one friend, you compromise once, and you will recover if you turn back to God. Degrees, but if you ask 10 friends, you have hopelessly compromised your creation by 10,000 times 10, and it never will be nor can ever be that concept which you started with God to extend from the light. Degrees, the following question was asked by one student who has actually formed the habit of first looking within his own consciousness. Degrees, in the letter which contained his question he says, by continually practicing to look inward, I expect little by little to form the habit of living on my mountain top to such an extent that I will find my real self and live in this constant peace which passeth all understanding. Here is his question. Degrees, question. Last week I was meditating over a problem which had continued to remain unsolved for some time. Degrees, the thought that universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 332, I knew entered my thinking, and almost simultaneously the answer followed. The unexpected suddenness of the answer caused me to experience such great inspiration that I am wondering if I did not have a partial illumination? Answer. Degrees, every time an answer comes that way through the light, you have been illumined to that extent. Degrees, a full illumination is to have all knowledge given to you through the light all at once. Cosmic man is unfolding a little at a time by many illuminations, and the number of that many every man may set for himself. Question 0. The Bible speaks of the Father, the Son and the Holy Ghost, or Holy Spirit. Would that be the mother part of the Father, Mother God you speak of? Answer. Degrees, early mystics who were well illumined, knew of God's creative process of dividing the undivided. Degrees, Jesus fully knew it. His teachings, and Buddha's, and others, as well as the illumined mystic who wrote the Bhagavad Gita, fully indicate that they had knowledge. Degrees, you must realize, however, that they could not impart their knowledge to their barbarian and pagan peoples who were not ready to receive it. Jesus and all other mystics knew what love meant and tried also to impart that knowledge to mankind, which still belonged to the brute period. Degrees, the pagan world was no more able to comprehend the meaning of the Divine Trinity than it was able to comprehend the love principle of giving for re-giving. Degrees, the human race had not progressed sufficiently far to even comprehend the love principle, and still is unable to comprehend universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 333. GMA. Coop Go COCWCOCOM. C. Go Ao C. OG. G. CWG. G. G. LG. COC. OGG Wo C. G. C. GMCOCO Go C. Wo Go Ao G. Go Go. OWWCO it, except for the cosmic few who are far advanced in their unfolding beyond the masses who are still ignorant, selfish barbarians, because their desire for taking is still dominant in them. And so it was that the teachings of the mystics about the Divine Trinity of the Undivided One and the Divided Two of creation became a meaningless and unexplainable metaphysical abstraction because of the garbled beliefs and misunderstandings of past ages of ignorant, Superstitious miracle-loving primates. One barbarian misinterpretation of it stated that if an offender against God appeased God's anger against him by sufficient bloodshed or other sacrificial rites, God would descend as the Holy Ghost in the body of a dove which would sit upon the shoulder of the penitent one. Such beliefs persisted during and long after the time of Jesus. You cannot in any way compare these abstract misconceptions with the scientific fact of what God really meant by teaching His creative principle to His illumined messengers. Nor can you fit the words of pagan conceptions into words of dynamic meaning for this electric age of greater comprehension of the relation of God to matter and motion. Question degrees. God said, "This is my only begotten Son, in whom I am well pleased." I believe I realize the correct answer, but I would appreciate your explanation. Answer: the same answer, in general, applies to this as to your other question, answered above. Lack of ability of primitive peoples to comprehend caused words to be used in making that statement which fitted within the structure of their misconceptions. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 334. These misconceptions still exist, for miracle-loving believers in supernatural phenomena still exist among you. The scientific meaning of the statement you quote is that Jesus was the only fully illumined Son of His Father-Mother up to His day. Jesus fully knew that fact himself, for God prepared him as His messenger to his age to plant the first seeds of love for their gradual unfolding in human consciousness. Many centuries have passed and the seeds have only now begun to in a small percentage of the great masses of humans. You must realize that Jesus gave His message of love to men of the brute stage of man. Bloodshed and cruelty were the pleasures of His day. Kindliness and mercy were but words to a people, even the children of people, whose measure of pleasure in the arena was the measure of cruelty and bloodshed served to them for their amusement. That seed has been extremely slow to unfold, for man had been brute for so many eons upon eons that cruelty had become his tune. Question. In Lesson 7, page 107, you say there is no such thing in nature as evil, sin or shame. Nature is never unbalanced, and on page 116, and that every insect, bird and beast, are instinctively controlled and watched over. How then do you explain the condition of animals destroying their kind for food? Answer. Animals do not destroy each other for food. They but interchange their bodies with each other for the perpetuation of bodies including their own. They still exist as a timal idea. They cannot be destroyed. All bodies interchange with other. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 335. Bodies perpetually. The present body of the zebra interchanges with the lion to perpetuate the idea of the lion. The body of the lion then interchanges with earth to perpetuate the idea of the zebra. The zebra thus acquires a new body to give to the lion. Bear this fact in mind, that the zebra cannot help giving its body to the lion even if it dies a natural death. Neither can you prevent giving your body back to the earth to manifest the idea of the cow, the sheep or the apple tree, which likewise give their bodies to you to manifest the idea of you. You must realize that idea is eternal and cannot be destroyed, but bodies which manifest idea constantly come and go to interchange with each other for each other degrees. When God created bodies of animals, He created other bodies to interchange with them, and He watched over them by giving them instinct to find those other bodies, and He, likewise, gave those other bodies instinct as to what animals will prey upon them in order that they should find balance for their continuance. All of creation is always in balance, If the rabbits in a forest unbalance the other growths of the forest, foxes will increase to ensure balance by lessening the number of rabbits, and so it is with increase of birds where unbalance of insect life appears. Nature creates bodies only to manifest the one whole body of nature, for all nature is but one body of interchanging parts, just as your body is one body of interchanging parts. Nature constantly interchanges bodies to keep the whole body of nature in balance. Your own body manifests the idea of you by destroying countless universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 336. Bodies every moment in order that they do not destroy your body. Degrees. These microbe bodies were created to return your body to the earth at the time of its refolding. While your body is vital enough for you to absorb or destroy them, it will do so, but countless other millions are waiting to eventually fulfill their purpose in obedience to natural law. Degrees. You must realize that a perpetual chemical transformation is forever taking place in nature in order that bodies may be created to manifest idea. Degrees. You could not have a body otherwise, nor could the tree, or meadow grass, or the grape on the vine. Degrees. God's plan of procedure in this respect is briefly the division of all bodies into three qualities which we know of as the mineral, vegetable and animal kingdoms. Degrees. The mineral kingdom comes first. God creates minerals by creating suns to act as crucibles for melting them. They are then set out to cool in the forms of hot planets, such as Mercury, which is all mineral and still so hot that copper will melt on its surface. Then Venus, which has cooled sufficiently for water to appear and allow the extension of vegetable life from the mineral. Degrees. Then hundreds of millions of years later, vegetable and mineral kingdoms interchange with the help of water, and animal life extends from that in as slow beginnings as vegetable life appeared. As all three kingdoms interchange with each other, their mutual interchangings form bodies containing all three in sufficient balance to perpetuate the ideas which gradually become manifested through such interchange of giving for regiving. Go. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 337. Every manifestation of such interchange is a manifestation of the love principle, which nature or man can violate if they choose, but at their peril. Degrees. If the heavens give insufficient rain, the earth regives insufficiently of vapors for regiving. Degrees. Deserts do not give clouds to heavens, but forests and rivers do. Likewise, if man upsets the balance of productivity in oceans by wholesale nettings, or of soil erosion by wrong planting methods, or of bird life by taking more than his needs, he suffers from his overtakings until nature restores the balance he has upset. Degrees. Perhaps you might get a better idea of the workings of nature than the idea you propounded in your question if you will think of all interchange of every nature as good. Degrees. Man learns by his hard experiences in taking more than he gives. He himself suffers for the unbalances he has caused, but that suffering leads to the correction of his unbalancing by hard labor and deprivation. Degrees. These ills of man's making are good because they lead to good. Degrees. It is as good that the lion has its zebra as that the bird has its worm. Degrees. Without that interchange there would be no grass for the cow and no milk for your children. Without that balanced interchange of mineral, vegetable and animal kingdoms, this planet would become a stony, metallic, barren desert floating in the skies. Degrees. There would no longer be the sounds of singing birds, nor worms for them, nor grass for the cow, nor children to need milk. Degrees. God's creation is all good, no part of it is bad, nor wrong. Universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 338. Nor evil. How can it be? How can we think of it as otherwise than good? For all of it, in its entirety, is the expression of God's love. Question. Degrees. Please define love. Answer. Love is the ecstasy of peace and rest in the balanced light of all-knowing which is God. The expressi0n of love is in balanced giving and re-giving to manifest love arterially. It must be known that love is not its expression, and much confusion arises because of a mistaken idea. Such confusion has persisted for centuries in all thinking. Motion, for example, is an expression of energy, but it is not energy as popularly presumed. Likewise, bodies are not the life which they manifest. The universe manifests its creator, but the universe is not its creator, nor is the poem the poet, nor the picture its painter. To know love you must know the light of love. To express you must be love, just as you must be the poet if you would express poetry. The greatest confusion in regard to love is the very much mistaken idea that it is a physical thing which is possessed or can be possessed, or that love is its physical expression in material bodies. Question: a recent communication contains such sentences as these: "The will to peace is being released by our love-powered prayers, and except for the Cabinet and Congress God's guiding wisdom, and release through him the unfailing power of universal law." Natural Science and Philosophy, page 339. Your love to destroy our enemies by filling them with the spirit of brotherhood. This raises the whole question of what some call intercessory prayer. You have said very plainly in your studies that God works with and not for one, p. 47, and that we should not sit and ask, acting not, for unless we reach out for our desire it shall not walk our way unaided by our strong arm. P. 67. My hope is that you will expand on the possibility, if any, of direct effect without the medium of the ordinary senses. When you say that desire within the soul will always command the whole universe to fulfill the desire, p. 75, can this include a direct effect in behalf of our enemies apart from such efforts to work with God as movements for personal or national reconciliations? Is such a direct effect made possible through strongly seeing the oneness of all, so that our lives become a divine extension of that one? Prelude, p. 7. I have deeply valued lessons 5 and 6 and all that you say about love as giving and re-giving as an inviolate law, and I absolutely agree that we ourselves should work out in action the desire, but please help us on the validity of direct influence in what is usually called intercessory prayer? Answer: it is amazing how little ordinary human reason is applied to that subject of direct effort, direct influence and direct effect of intercessor. 2p.72120. What you are really asking me is this: do you believe that by getting enough people to join in love-powered prayer God will fill the enemies which have been made through unfair dealings with them with the spirit universal law? Natural Science and Philosophy, page 340. Of brotherhood toward all, so that we may continue to keep what we have taken from them by force, and hurt them as much as we want to, without ourselves being hurt? In other words, there can be no love-powered prayers to God by any nation on earth today that asks for protection from, or conversion of enemies, for they are based upon selfish motives. Those who do this are seeking to evade the consequences of their inactions by asking God for a harvest of peace and love from whirlwind sowing. Let us consider this: why do we have enemies that hurt us, steal from us, and kill us? The answer is that we are enemies of other people in whom we have bred hate and fear by hurting them, stealing from them and killing them. The whole world is the enemy of the whole world, for love has not yet entered it. The whole world is divided against itself because the whole world has tried to build its own wealth and power by robbing its neighbor. The survival by might idea is an inheritance from the jungle, The world is in a transitory stage of its unfolding. We are still primates and barbarians who still use pagan methods of taking what we want force. Every man fears his neighbor, else he would not lock his doors nor police his streets. Every nation fears every other nation, else it would not spend countless billions in armaments. This has been so since the dawn of consciousness in man. Early history is full of intercessory prayer to God from one greedy enemy who wishes to smite his enemy or to evade being universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 341. Smitten. Early tribes and nations have asked God to take sides with them against other men and nations. The early history of man is saturated with cruelty. Tribes killed prisoners by the thousands, men, women and children, and condemned countless thousands to slavery. You, who have asked this question, undoubtedly feel that the world is now civilized, and that the days of conquest and killings have passed, and part of the world is good and the other part bad. The bad half is what you mean when you say destroying our enemies by filling them with the spirit of brotherhood. Let us consider that point of view. We, the American nation, pose as being a righteous nation with no desire to aggress any other nation. In taking that stand, we do not realize that we have been an enemy of mankind for centuries of cruelty and aggression for the purpose of building our empire. We have fought 117 wars, killed the inhabitants for the lands we wanted, attained more lands by killing and sharp practice, and abducted hundreds of thousands of black men from Africa with untold cruelty to enslave them for our selfish purposes. Do not illy, but that was yesterday and our forefathers did it, not us, for we are extensions of our forefathers, and we are reaping the harvest which they sowed. We cannot 2.1. 12 years it's stolen fruits without paying heavily for it. The price we are paying is in the blood of 10 for every one we have killed, 133 becoming enemies we have made enemies. We are hundreds of billions in debt because of the few billions we stole. We are criminals in respect to God's law, failing universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 342. Righteousness in our people who are being persecuted by enemies, forgetful of our persecution of man by us as his enemy. God's law will not allow any man or nation to reap harvests of the luscious fruits of peace and goodwill who sows the seeds of hate and ill will. We have acquired our freedom by depriving other men of their freedom, and now we wonder why other men wish to deprive us of our hard-fought for freedom. We call them our envies, and ask God in love-powered prayers to set aside his laws in favor of us, as one enemy of man as against another enemy of man. So much for this country. Let us consider England. The history of the building of the British Empire is red with blood and black with infamy. England conquered one nation after another for her own personal gain. While sending missionaries to the heathen half of the world to Christianize them, it exploited them for gain. There is no blacker page in history than the attempted degradation of China by the forced sale of opium, which resulted in 17 opium wars, tremendous bloodshed, and the confiscation of lands as the price England exacted from China to make her pay for trying to save herself from the English terror. England grew rich and powerful, but not happy. She had created too many enemies to feel secure or happy. No one can gain happiness, let alone happiness from another. Like America and the rest of the world, she lived by the sword and is dying by the sword. For centuries England could never tell which of the enemies she created would strike next, and every such war drained her best blood. As a consequence, England is today on rations. Her empire, universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 343, is disintegrating. And so is our empire. This enemy-creating world is a world of hatred and fear. The history of one empire is like another. Spain, Germany, France, Holland, Belgium, Italy and Dutch East Indies conquests. Belgian Congo atrocities are modern replicas of the scourgings of medieval and ancient villagers, who went to wars of killings asking God's help, and returned to ask His blessings upon their conquests and to thank Him for their victories over their enemies. And so my answer is that so long as we are building the kind of world that we have been and are building, we cannot ask God to set aside His laws and intercede in our favor as against another who also wishes to set aside God's laws himself. All of us together have built our world, not just one bad half as against a good half. All of us together have created our Hitlers, our Mussolinis, and our Stalins, our class wars, such as the privileged and underprivileged, gentry and serf, capital and labor, and rich and poor have bred fascism, Nazism and communism. Degrees freedom is disintegrating through infiltration of communism, culture is lowering, moral fiber and citizenry is decaying. We are losing our best blood in war after war and are not producing great men as leaders, or great geniuses in the arts and invention, or great statesmen for our fast corrupting governments. The great European nations of a generation ago are now weak, and our own country is the last hope for a renaissance. We have lived by the sword, and the decadence of world death by the sword is evident everywhere. Disunity is multiplying as decadence in weakened nations multiplies. Universal Law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 344. The whole world is facing another dark age. It is on the very verge of it. The only thing which will prevent the world from plunging into that abyss is for mankind to stop being the enemy of man and be his friend. Stop taking and beginning _z1.tag. Stop fearing man and begin loving him. When nations of God-fearing men become nations of God-loving RN who practice God's ways, the world will be saved from world suicide, and not until. That is why God sent His message to man at this time. That is why He sent new knowledge to teach men His ways. That is why He gave to mankind His one law for the cosmic age now in its dawning, the law of rhythmic balanced interchange in all transactions of man as in nature. Man has not been ready for this new knowledge until now. In his unfolding he had to progress through the primate age of self-interest to the spiritual age of mutual interest in the brother. 11, Out of man. Through new comprehension of this electric universe, man is now ready to comprehend and know God. 9, and man's own suffering has led him to that edge of his abyss from where he must turn back and seek the light. When the day comes when man has really faced the light instead of the dark, he will then pray to his Father for his own worthiness to live in the light, to manifest the light, and not that other men should be worthy. As your question suggests, you can now readily understand that a world condition which universal law, Natural Science and Philosophy, page 345, is the result of millions of years of slow unfolding cannot possibly be brought to its final goal. What you call direct effect resulting from the desire of your soul, or even the world soul, degrees in God's unfolding universe. All idea is expressed in time cycles, and you can no more press a button to complete a cycle of man's unfolding than you can press a button to bring an oak tree into full growth overnight. Conclusion. However, do not misinterpret this answer on prayer to mean that I do not think that sincere groups who meet in prayer for the purpose of launching good thoughts out into the ether are not doing a very great service to human progress, and especially to themselves. Degrees. This is a thought wave universe. Thoughts have thought bodies and can be reflected in the thoughts of other people by what is known as telepathy, which is really thought radars. When you do this, however, it is Y0 your love thought which extends from you to your fellow man degrees. Your love thought is inspired by your own God awareness and desire for godliness to be expressed in all men degrees. It is, therefore, your desire, and your expression of love that you are extending from your own soul to the souls of other men, and those thoughts will be reflected in those who are ready for them and will reflect back into your own soul to influence your own thought and actions. Remember, however, that your thought and desire for the unity of man is not a prayer from you to God, asking him to use his powers for remedying the defects of other man's intercessory universal law. Natural Science and Philosophy, page 346. Prayer infers that you are asking God to intercede between you and other men who are causing you unhappiness, whereas God's law exists and works for you and for all other men whether you request it or not, and whether it causes you unhappiness or not. In other words, when you love your neighbor as yourself, and send such thoughts out into the world, you are fulfilling God's command. You are yourself obeying God's law. You are not asking God to do it for you. You are extending your desire to other men to unify all men. In the meantime, God awaits man's slow unfolding and says to man, I am a patient God. All men will come to me in due time, but theirs is the agony of awaiting. 99. From the Divine Iliad. Swannanoa, Waynesboro, Virginia. Dear friends, once more we wish to tell you of the great pleasure your wonderful letters are giving us, and of the great satisfaction and encouragement of them because of so many demonstrations of power which are arising from the greater understanding of God's ways of thinking and working. One which touched our hearts deeply was the great success of a lover of art who had never studied at all, but who had been making extremely good paintings from pure love of nature and desire for self-expression. Almost overnight a tremendous power came to him from deep inspiration. For several weeks afterward he painted pictures which were so far beyond anything he had ever before done that he himself was astonished, but not surprised, for he knew that something so wonderful had happened within his soul that each brushstroke made him feel that for the first time in his life he was working knowingly with God. His pictures immediately received front-page notices in the newspapers and were prominently reproduced with favorable comment in a leading art magazine. This is a demonstration of what I mean when I say that one who works knowingly with God, works with God's hands together with his as one. The first question answered in Lesson No. 20 was from one who had felt that illumination had come to him suddenly in the solution of a personal problem. This also is a demonstration of God awareness, that is the way it always comes suddenly, for all inspired conceptions are timeless. Knowledge is a quality of the undivided mind universe in which there is no time. Thoughts of mind, however, take time, for thoughts are divided waves, and waves are synchronized with the universal heartbeat, which creates the idea of time. As more and more of you become thoroughly familiar with the practice of working knowingly with God, until it becomes a habit, the world will know more and more about it, and geniuses will again be produced as they were during the 300 years following the great Renaissance, which gave us such inspired geniuses as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo and others up through the days of Liszt, Chopin and Wagner, Tennyson, Shakespeare and Keats, to such recent geniuses as Kipling, Dickens, Walt Whitman and Thomas Jefferson. Degrees. Every man is an inherent genius, and there should be an ever-increasing number of geniuses in the world. Degrees. You have it in you, and so have your sons, daughters and friends. The greatest man who ever lived is no greater than you, except that he knew that he was and did something about it. The hope of world culture is the production of more geniuses, and the only way to produce them is to make men aware of their genius. Conversely, the only way to make men realize the maximum of happiness in life is to produce geniuses, for they are the only ones who are capable of knowing happiness. By genius you mean the man who has learned to live life gloriously at a maximum, not just the genius who has expressed himself in the arts. That is why we constantly urge upon you the necessity of knowing God so that you will see yourself reflected in Him, or know yourself to be an extension of Him. The more you do unfold your genius, the more you will be enabled to uplift the world to the level you have yourself attained. Have you ever realized that if the world consisted only of geniuses there could be no wars? That is a fact. Nevertheless, for genius in man is God awareness, so naturally as God awareness increases, materiality decreases, and materialists are the ones who make wars degrees. Have you also realized that the geniuses of the world are those who spend more time in solitude and aloneness than other men? For in their solitude they find that ecstasy which is the greatest bliss that man can know. Find time, therefore, to lose your body as much as you can. When you are aware of your body you can be lonesome, terribly lonesome and dejected, but never if you can find the exaltation and ecstasy which is in your soul. Knowing this from a lifetime of working with full awareness of the eternal man, whom I am, instead of the transient body which is but the instrument I use for self-expression, I have been able to multiply my powers of expression by many times that which man limits himself to when he thinks of himself as body. Therein is the secret of self-discovery, therein lies the difference between greatness and mediocrity, stability and instability, and strength and weakness in man. That completion of your self-discovery should be your supreme adventure, an exciting, fascinating personal adventure of that in you which visions, versus that in you which senses what you vision. That is the one great thing which gives zest to life, that something in you which surmounts and overrides annoyances as though they did not exist, which sees no obstacle anywhere between your vision and its consummation. Life is glorious when it is all that way, and it really is that way when that which is eternal in you makes you forget all else but the eternal and God's universe, the rest of it being mirage which really cannot touch you. Why, when you know it cannot, that is the way it is with Lao and me when we extend ourselves to you in these words which are of the message. For Lao and I visioned the multiplication of genius in man by searching in the dross of matter for the gems of eternity which lie within the bodies of mankind as pearls await discovery of their hidden existence in the opacity of dull matter. We told you some time ago that we had a plan for the multiplication of genius leaders of men. We are nearing the point where we can tell you more about it. The world has been decimated of its leaders. The world is not producing geniuses. The human race has become anemic through drainage of its fine blood and decadent because of burying its geniuses in many Flanders poppy fields instead of nurturing them with love in the light of Manie's need degrees. When we are likely to give that plan of resurrection to the world, and the method of it, and tell you of God's explicit and detailed instructions regarding his plan for the resurrection of eternal man of his cosmic age, from its burying place in the earth of past ages. These lessons will have illumined more of you to become the light of that resurrection. When that glorious day comes, then you who have found eternity within the hollow of your hand to use as though it were God's hand, shall stand beside us, Lao and I, and look out from God's sacred mountain of resurrection into its glorious veils below, through which eternal man of tomorrow shall find new paths into a new world of a new kind of life adventure motivated by love, and by balanced dealings of man with man which passeth all understanding degrees. That is our aim and our goal, but we have had to be very patient, and work very hard and wait long for you to catch up, for we need you, many of you, for that day which is not far from fulfillment. This is our message to you for now, a message of happiness which comes from seeing visions nearing fulfillment in the race of men, of visions of the saving of the race of men foretold in the message for fulfillment before the year of 1961 shall have passed its sunset, which leads into its night. With our love and gratitude to our Father Mother for your coming within the radiant aura of his message, I am, sincerely yours, Walter Russell 350.